the first thing you want to do is find Photoshop. So you can find it here. If it's not in here, you go to All Programs and you find Adobe. And under Adobe, you can open it there, okay? And there's Adobe Photoshop CC. So you want to open that. This is called the workspace in Adobe Photoshop, okay? So it looks a little intimidating because you see that it has a whole bunch of stuff in it. You're going to probably have some windows and stuff that open, and that's fine. But what we want to do is make sure at least 2 windows are open. And the 2 we want open are Layers and History. Okay, we want to make sure Layers and History are always open. History allows us to go back and see what steps we've made, and when I come to help you, I can help you with that and see what you did that might have tripped you up or something. And the Layers palette, we're going to talk about that in a minute. So then we want to go, this little bar here is called the toolbar. Now that you can move around. By default it's on the left side, but you can move it wherever you want. And it looks intimidating because you go, what are all these icons? What does everything do? But you're going to learn a lot of these. Not all, but a lot. If you hover over them, it'll tell you what it does. In a second it will. There you go. It'll tell you what each of these things does. Okay? And also in the corner, if there is a little arrow, that means that there's more other tools and options behind that. And you see almost all of them have that. So you can go through and check, and we'll learn some of those as we go through. Okay? Right now, we're going to care only about a few of these. So we'll talk about that when we get to them. So the first thing we want to do is open a photo and put it into Photoshop. So we want to go File, Open. Now, we got to find a picture that we want to put in there. So I'm going to put in this picture. Okay? So now I have this picture in here. I have these little windows open, which is fine, what I wanted. And there's my picture. But what Photoshop does when you bring a picture in, and it does what's called docking, or it attaches it to the top. Lots of times that's a little bit irritating. So to undock it, you just pull that down and it releases it. Or to put it back in, you move it up and it automatically goes back in. Pull it down to release it. Now, I have an image that's this size. It's inside of a frame that I can adjust. So I can adjust this frame to be bigger or smaller. And I can adjust my picture, the look of it, bigger or smaller by using Control plus or Control minus on the keyboard. Control plus makes it bigger. Control minus makes it smaller. Now, that's the look of the picture. It doesn't actually save the size of it. It just saves the look of it. And sometimes we want to get close to see if something's sharp or not. So we hit Control plus, and then we hold the space bar down, and the cursor turns into a hand, which allows us to move the picture around to whatever we want. Okay? I can move it around once I've done that with the space bar down. The way Photoshop was designed, your left hand is on the keyboard hitting keystrokes, your right hand is on the mouse, or vice versa. And so that we can hit keystrokes to make things a little bit quicker. So the first thing we want to do in anything we do is crop. Okay? That's the first thing we want to do to any picture. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to the crop icon, which is here, the 5th tool down. If you hover over it, it'll say crop tool. And you notice that it's 2 L-shaped brackets. That's because in the old days we used to use cardboard in that shape, and we would crop pictures back in the Stone Age when I started cropping stuff. But you'll see that now it turns into all of this is selected. You see a little dotted line around it, and you see handles. There's a handle in the middle, handle in the corners. And now you can just click and drag those in any way you want. And you notice what happened to the inside here. What happened in here? What did it create in here that we just learned about? Rule of thirds, right? Because it's helping you set that up so that you can make this be the rule of thirds. So I think doing it horizontally and getting this really great S-curve in is going to be really cool. So I'm going to do that with this picture, okay? And then I'm going to hit Enter so that it's there now. Now, if I go over to the History palette, you'll see that I have Open, which is here, and then I have Crop. So this is how I can go back and check something. The other thing I can do, if I want to go back one step in Photoshop, is Control Z. Okay? So if I'm here and I go back Control Z, whoops, Control Z will take me back one step. Control Alt Z will take me back more than one step. Okay, or I can go to the history palette. Either one of those allows me to go back, and many times you want to do that. Okay, so this is open, and this is cropping it. Okay, so we want to make it bigger now. How do I make it bigger? Control plus. Okay, so I want to see it more. So I have that image there. Okay, and I think it looks good with that curve there, with rather than having this whole image that I think has some wasted space in it here, right? So I think the crop is better. Control plus to make it bigger. Okay, now I want to adjust. The next thing I always want to do is go back to the layers palette, and on the very bottom there's this little yin-yang symbol looking thing that's half black, half white. I hover over it, it says create a new fill or adjustment layer. We're going to end up doing lots of layers in our photos. That's what Photoshop is designed for, is having layers, which means you can always go back to a layer and undo something or redo something. So I'm going to click on that, and you see that the whole menu pops up of a bunch of stuff. So we're going to learn some of these. The first thing I want you to click on is levels. So levels is here, and what it does is it's giving you a histogram here of all the shadow areas, the midtones, and the highlights in your picture. So I'm going to see the triangles on the histogram. One is black, one is gray, and one is white. This tells you that the black one is the distribution of the shadow pixels on your picture. This is the mid-tone, and it's telling you this is the mid-tone range of the pixels on your picture, and this is the highlight areas. Sometimes that histogram will be way off, and there'll be like empty spaces there, and we'll talk about what to do with that a little bit later. But right now, that looks good, so that we don't need to adjust anything. But we will always want to check it before we do anything else. Now, after we've done that, we want to go back to our adjustment layer here. And we want to go to brightness and contrast. Okay? So now we have another window that pops up, and we can now change to make the picture brighter or darker. Now remember, the screen is darker than my actual picture, so I'm going to darken it up because it's a little bit bright and it's a little bit contrasty. So I'm going to take the brightness down and the contrast down a little bit. Okay? I know on the screen it looks a little dark, but on mine it looks a lot better. Now, one of the cool things and one of the best things about the layers is you can go back and readjust them, but you can also turn them on or off. So right now, I can turn this by the eyeball on the left here is the viewer. So if I turn that on or off, I can see what I did to that picture. So I have a little bit more richness, right? And I can see the adjustments that I made there. And if I want to go back in and fix that again, I just go back and click that little icon, and this will pop back up, and I can say, you know, maybe I want to make it a hair brighter and a hair less contrasty maybe, and then I have it there. I don't have to do another brightness and contrast. So now I have that all set up. And now you see there are 3 layers here. The background layer, the levels, which we didn't do anything in, and the brightness and contrast layer. So those are things that I can adjust at any time. And that's what we want to do. We want to be able to do that because we want to make the picture the best it can be. So now the picture looks really good, and I want to save it. So in order to save this picture, I go into File, Save As. File, Save As. Now you'll see this drop-down thing. I want to save it into my S drive. Right now I'm saving it onto my desktop, but you want to save it into your S drive. You're going to click the drop-down here, and you're going to go to TIFF, which is at the very bottom, TIFF. Okay, .TIF. That's called a TIFF file. We want to save that, so I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to say Moth on Flower. Okay, and I'm going to save it. Okay, and I say save, and I say OK. So the beauty of saving as a TIFF, because we're going to talk about file extensions in a minute, is that you have the ability to keep your layers here. So if I close this out and I open that file again, here when I find it, just find it where it is, Moth on Flower. So if I right click and I open with Photoshop, when I open it, you'll see that my layers are still all here. Okay? And that's what I want to do. While I'm working on my picture, I want to save it as a TIFF. Save it as a TIFF. So now I want to resave it. So I'm going to go up to File, Save As, and now I'm going to do the drop down to JPEG. That's about halfway down in the type menu here. So there's the JPG, JPEG or JPEG. Okay, and I'm going to click on that. I don't need to do anything because Photoshop will automatically put the extension on there, and then I say Save. And then I say, okay, we want a fairly large file from 10 to 12 here, and so we say okay. Okay, so now I'm going to close out of this one. And now if I come in and I open that JPEG, how is it going to be different than the TIFF? What happened here? All the layers are gone because when you save something as a JPEG, it compresses all the layers and they're gone. And that's good because we want to have a smaller file size. So, but when we do have one that is a TIFF, and we open that, all of our layers are still here because we've saved it as a TIFF. Even though the pictures look exactly the same, we have the ability to go in and fix things in here in the TIFF. Okay, so we want to always, while we're working on an image, we save it as a TIFF. When it's all done, we go back in and we save it as a JPEG. Now, you could save it as a so it helps if we open one, right? We could save it as a sometimes what this will want to default to is the Photoshop, the PSD file. If you save it as that, I'm going to save it as that just to show you. That's .psd. That's Photoshop's proprietary one. Now, if I go in and I show you where that is, you see right here, you cannot see a thumbnail of it. All you see is the icon for Photoshop. So we never want to save as a PSD file because you cannot see a thumbnail of it. It's kind of frustrating. So now we've fixed that one. Let's grab another picture and show you something else that we want to do. So let's say we have a picture with a crooked horizon in it, like this one. What we want to do if we have a picture with a crooked horizon is straighten it. So we come down to the icon for cropping. And then you'll notice up here, right above here, will appear the word straighten. If I click on that, my cursor turns into a level. You know the level with the bubble in it? So that's now there. If I use the crossbar in the plus sign, and I go along, left mouse click, and I draw it along where the horizon is, and let go, it automatically straightens that out. You'll notice you're going to lose some image around the edges. That's because when you straighten it out to get the, like this tip here and this tip here, you're going to lose some of that. So you just hit enter, and now you have the image with a nice straight horizon in it. And we want that when we're doing that. Okay, so let's also show you something else that's kind of fun that everybody seems to love, which is the clone stamp. So let's open this picture of Evans. And we want to, so the first thing we're going to do to this picture is what? Crop it. We always want to crop an image first. So let's, when we don't go in here, we see now we have rule of thirds. I don't think we need so much here, right? So maybe we'll do something like this where this little, I don't want this little brown edge in, so I'm going to come above that. And you'll notice that the dime is at a perfect intersect point of the rule of thirds, so I click enter. So that's cool, but now I have these little spots that are in the paint, and I want to get rid of those spots. How do I make the image bigger? Control plus. Okay, and then to move it, hold the space bar down. It turns into a hand. I can move it. I want to get rid of those dots. So to do that, I'm going to use what's called the clone stamp. That's right here. And what it does is it takes information from one area of your picture and stamps it over the other area. So I left mouse click, and now my cursor turns into a circle, which means that it's a brush. How I change my brush size and make it bigger or smaller is using the bracket keys on the computer. The left bracket key makes it smaller, the right bracket key makes it bigger. Okay, left bracket smaller, right bracket bigger. Or I can come over here to the palette for that, and you can see I can change the size, but I have to keep checking it. I have to keep coming back and checking it. So it's not nearly as easy as having your left hand on the keyboard and doing the brackets bigger or smaller. I want the brush size to be slightly bigger than the area I'm stamping over. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Now, in order to use the clone stamp, I hold the Alt key down, and you'll see that it turns into a target. My cursor turns into a target. And if I left mouse click somewhere here of the same color and stuff that I want to stamp over that with, I left mouse click, let go, come over and just mouse click on top of that, then it goes away. Hold the Alt key down, grab from here, and stamp over that, and it went away. And let's say I want to stamp over this part and get rid of that, or this rock, or this one here, or this, which just looks kind of gross here. So I can take some of those out, okay? I mean, you could go crazy and take them all out, but you kind of just want to do what is kind of in your way of your picture here and making it distracting. So now if I go back into the history, you'll see here that I have all of these steps I took. And I could go back to here and you'll see all of those clone guys pop back in. Do you see them all there and go away and come back? So it's a lot better without all those, yeah? Oops. Go back to crop. If I come down, I can stay there, and I got rid of all those spots, and I make it a better picture that way. And then I'm going to go File, Save As what? TIFF. So I'm going to go to the bottom and save it as a TIFF, and let's call it hand. Okay, and I'm going to say Save. So now when I say OK, now on my desktop, I will have that picture saved as a TIFF without the spots in it because I adjusted those out. All right? And that's what we want to do when we're playing with something like this, is we want to adjust it and adjust the darkness, the lightness, etc., because it can make a huge difference on your picture. Here's another one to get rid of the distracting thing on here. I only want you to use the clone stamp for small things. So this is the class photo sticker, right? So I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to use my clone stamp. I'm going to use Control Plus to make this bigger. And I want to get near that. And I'm going to make the brush bigger. So I'm going to use the bracket keys to make it bigger. The reason it's red is it's remembering the last thing we cloned. So I'm going to hold the Alt key down, get this color, and come over. And I can get rid of all of this, okay? So now that class sticker is gone, okay? And we just have the shirt here. You can also have a lot of fun with the clone stamp, which I know a lot of people like to do. So you can like take an eyeball or something here and make them have another eyeball up there. Put an eyeball here. Because you can clone stamp anything, okay? So I'm going to take this one and I can bring it up here. I think I did something wrong on that. Let's back it up. Okay, so I can make the beak coming out of his mouth if I want. My computer's being really slow, so no clue what's happening here. So let's say I want to take the beak. I want to make that coming out of the top. It seemed to have grabbed something else here. Let's try that again. I don't know why it's acting so weird, guys. Sorry. Alright, let's try this again. So hold the Alt key down, grab that, and then put that there. Computer's being very slow and weird. Not sure why. Anyway, you can play with that. You can see what that does. Not make it too crazy because you don't want to. So here's where I put the beak on his head. So you can do that. Now, when you're clone stamping something, you want to have your brush be soft. So there's this hardness slider here. You don't ever want it to be hard because if you have it hard, it makes a rounded edge around it. So if I come here and I do this and do that, you'll see that it makes a hard edge instead of a soft edge around it. So a soft edge will blend it into the background better, but a hard edge does not. So you want to have a soft edge on your brush. And that's just this slider here. Okay? And then Those are the adjustments that you want to make when you're adjusting in Photoshop for the class.